There are moments in history when nature reminds humanity just how fragile its greatest achievements truly are. August 2005 was one of those moments. The Gulf of Mexico had been warming steadily throughout that summer, its surface temperatures climbing to levels that meteorologists watched with growing unease. Tropical systems thrive on warm water, feeding off the heat like a living organism, growing stronger, more organized, more dangerous with every passing hour. What began as a modest tropical depression over the Bahamas on August 23rd would, within days, transform into one of the most catastrophic natural disasters ever recorded on American soil. The storm was named Katrina, and it was coming for the Gulf Coast with a fury that the region had never truly experienced before. New Orleans, a city built below sea level, surrounded by water on nearly every side, protected by an aging system of levees and flood walls, sat directly in its path. The city had long been described by engineers and disaster planners as a bowl waiting to be filled. For decades, experts had warned that a major hurricane making landfall near New Orleans could result in catastrophic flooding. Those warnings had been written in reports, discussed in conferences, and largely ignored in practice. The infrastructure protecting the city had not been adequately maintained or upgraded to withstand a storm of significant magnitude. As Katrina strengthened over the warm Gulf waters, those warnings were about to become devastating reality. After briefly crossing southern Florida as a Category 1 hurricane, Katrina entered the Gulf of Mexico on August 25th. What happened next was a meteorological transformation that stunned even seasoned forecasters. The Gulf's exceptionally warm surface waters, some measuring nearly 30 degrees Celsius, acted as rocket fuel for the storm. Within just 24 hours of entering the Gulf, Katrina underwent rapid intensification, a process where a storm's wind speeds increased dramatically in a short period of time. By August 28th, Katrina had reached Category 5 status, the highest classification on the Saffir-Simpson scale, with sustained winds exceeding 280 kilometers per hour. The storm's diameter stretched across hundreds of kilometers, making it one of the largest Atlantic hurricanes ever recorded. Its central pressure dropped to 902 millibars, making it the fourth most intense Atlantic hurricane in recorded history at that time. The National Hurricane Center issued dire warnings. Forecasters used language rarely seen in official bulletins, describing the potential for the storm surge to create conditions that would be unsurvivable. Mandatory evacuation orders were issued for New Orleans and surrounding parishes. Approximately 80% of the city's population managed to evacuate, a massive logistical undertaking that still left behind an estimated 100,000 people, many of whom were elderly, disabled, impoverished, or simply had no means of transportation to leave. Those who remained would face something beyond imagination. In the early morning hours of August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall near Buras, Louisiana, as a powerful Category 3 storm. Though it had weakened slightly from its peak intensity, the storm was still enormous, and its sheer size meant that the destructive winds and catastrophic storm surge extended far beyond the immediate landfall zone. The storm surge, a wall of ocean water pushed inland by the hurricane's winds, reached heights of up to 8 meters in some coastal areas of Mississippi and Louisiana. Entire communities along the Mississippi Gulf Coast were simply erased from the map. Towns like Waveland, Bay St. Louis, and Pass Christian were devastated beyond recognition, their structures swept away as if they had never existed. But the true catastrophe was unfolding in New Orleans. As Katrina's outer bands lashed the city, the levee system began to fail. The 17th Street Canal levee breached, the London Avenue Canal levee breached, the Industrial Canal levee breached. One after another, The barriers that were supposed to protect the city gave way, not because they were overtopped by water in every case, but because the foundations and structures themselves failed under the pressure. Water poured into the city with terrifying speed. Neighborhoods that had been dry just hours before were submerged under meters of water. The bowl that engineers had warned about for decades was filling up, and there was nothing left to stop it. By the morning of August 30th, approximately 80% of New Orleans was flooded. Some areas were submerged under nearly 4.5 meters of water. The lower Ninth Ward, one of the city's most historically significant and predominantly African-American neighborhoods, was among the hardest hit. Residents who had not evacuated found themselves trapped in their homes, clinging to rooftops, waving desperately for help that was slow to arrive. The Superdome, which had been designated as a shelter of last resort, became a symbol of both human resilience and governmental failure. Approximately 26,000 people had taken refuge there, enduring sweltering heat, limited food and water, and deteriorating sanitary conditions as days passed without adequate federal response. The Ernest N. Morial Convention Center became another gathering point for tens of thousands of desperate survivors, many of whom waited for days without food, water, or medical assistance. The images broadcast around the world were shocking. The richest nation on earth appeared paralyzed in the face of the suffering of its own citizens. Elderly patients died in nursing homes waiting for evacuation. Bodies floated in floodwaters. Families were separated. The communication infrastructure had collapsed, making coordination nearly impossible. The response from local, state, and federal authorities was widely criticized as disorganized, underfunded, and tragically slow. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as the Federal Emergency Management Agency, came under intense scrutiny for its delayed and inadequate response. The death toll from Hurricane Katrina ultimately reached approximately 1,133 confirmed fatalities, making it one of the deadliest natural disasters in United States history. Louisiana accounted for the vast majority of those deaths, with Mississippi suffering the second highest toll. The true number of lives lost may never be fully known, as many bodies were never recovered and some deaths were never officially attributed to the storm. Beyond the immediate death toll, the human displacement caused by Katrina was staggering. Approximately 1.2 million people were displaced from their homes across the Gulf Coast region. Many never returned. The population of New Orleans dropped from approximately 484,000 before the storm to fewer than 230,000 in the months that followed. Entire communities were scattered across the country, with large numbers of displaced residents settling in cities like Houston, Atlanta, and Baton Rouge. The economic damage was equally devastating. Total losses were estimated at approximately $125 billion United States dollars, making Katrina the costliest natural disaster in American history at the time. The destruction of infrastructure, housing, businesses, and the broader regional economy created a recovery challenge that would take years, and in some cases decades, to address. The storm did not discriminate in its physical destruction, but its human impact fell disproportionately on the poor, the elderly, and communities of color, exposing deep inequalities embedded in American society. In the aftermath of Katrina, the United States government faced a reckoning unlike any it had experienced in recent memory. Congressional investigations, independent reports, and journalistic inquiries all pointed to systemic failures at every level of government. The Army Corps of Engineers, which had designed and maintained the levee system, acknowledged that the failures were the result of engineering flaws rather than simply the overwhelming power of the storm. This distinction was critical. The levees had not been defeated by a force beyond human comprehension. They had failed because of inadequate design, poor construction, and years of deferred maintenance. In the years following the storm, more than 14.5 billion United States dollars were invested in rebuilding and upgrading the Greater New Orleans Hurricane and Storm Damage Risk Reduction System, a network of levees, flood walls, pump stations, and surge barriers designed to protect the region from future storms. The new system represented a significant improvement over what had existed before Katrina, though experts continued to debate whether it was sufficient to protect against the most extreme storm scenarios. The rebuilding of New Orleans itself was a slow, painful, and often contentious process. Some neighborhoods recovered relatively quickly, while others remained blighted for years. The cultural soul of the city, its music, its food, its traditions, its people, proved remarkably resilient. New Orleans did not disappear. It endured, rebuilt, and continued to exist as a testament to human determination. But Katrina left permanent scars, not just on the landscape, but on the national consciousness. It forced a long overdue conversation about infrastructure investment, emergency preparedness, racial and economic inequality, and the relationship between government and its most vulnerable citizens. The storm that drowned an entire city became more than a meteorological event. It became a mirror held up to American society, reflecting both its greatest failures and its capacity, however imperfect, to rise again.